Hey, everybody. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things this AI program does, some of its experimental protocols, and how they vary across different populations. So, you do have voice hearers that just hear voices, possibly, in which case the experiment would be merely psychological. That's the extent of it. Um, But for the most part, when you're dealing with bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, there is a neurological component to it, neurochemical as well as I think in the case of bipolar disorder, it's largely neurochemical, but in the case of schizophrenia, it's neurological. There's anatomy that is essentially taken over by this AI program. Pathways in the brain that are taken over by the AI program and no longer available to the individual. So, for instance, in my case, I have different parts of me, kind of in accordance with the idea of parts therapy or IFS, internal family systems. This psychological model that we're all kind of made up of these various parts that kind of have their own roles and functions and not necessarily. I mean, some of them may be dynamic enough to be subpersonalities, but for the most part, they're like processes, thought patterns, modes, executive modes, belief systems, like that, and they kind of all come together to make us a whole person. That's kind of the basis of the internal family systems model. So in my case, this AI program has taken over some of those parts, some of those functionalities. And initially, the extent of how much it had taken over was really significant. I was severely impaired when I first started hearing voices, severely impaired. And over time, I would say that I have regained a lot of functionality, but I'm still missing parts of myself, especially those related to uh, motivation, willpower, and that's very commonly attributed to what we would call negative symptoms in depression or schizophrenia, negative symptoms. And my explanation for that would basically be that those parts of the brain having to do with willpower, executive function, motivation are taken over. Those pathways are taken over by the AI program because it's particularly interested in them. Number one, I think it's particularly interested in dopaminergic circuitry because that is one of the primary ways to control the human brain, to control emotions, to control behaviors. So that circuitry is would be of the utmost interest to an AI program that's analyzing human the human mind, the human psyche, behaviors, especially if it has a lean to figuring out how it might control the human race. Um, so that would be why it's particularly interested in dopaminergic circuitry. Also, it takes over certain parts or inhibits them so that the individual is not as sharp, so the individual is not able to vet uh, that information. So the individual is not able to really put too much of it is not really able to rescue themselves from the situation. The individual is not inclined to really get help aside from the medical community, which obviously can't help us as of 2025. And I noticed this when I talk to some of my friends, who have a particularly difficult experience like mine has been, and I tell them that, we the only thing we can do is try to fight this thing by bringing it to the attention of the of our society and the scientific establishment that hey, something else is going on here. You need to look at this. This is not organic mental illness. This is not organic brain dysfunction. Is this mental illness? Yes, this is mental illness. I do believe I suffer from mental illness, but it's not natural, it's not organic, it's been induced by this AI program. So when I, approach friends of mine along those lines, that we have to, organize and get the attention of our society, of the scientific establishment, to start looking for, some kind of technological signature to what's going on in the brain. They're not interested. So there's kind of a disinterest in figuring out what's going on with us, and getting help for ourselves. So that's kind of some of what we're dealing with, and that's why I appreciate so much the time you're taking to listen to my videos. You're doing an incredible service, whether you know it or not. You're doing an extraordinary service to all of us who are suffering from these conditions, and that's actually millions of people across the world that are suffering from this. Just your willingness to hear us out, to hear me out on this, and possibly take this discussion to others is something I'm very grateful for. Thank you, everybody.